The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Planted with Sara podcast. We are broadcasting live from ICBC. Actually, when you listen to this, it will be a recording, but we are in Barcelona. And I have a very special guest, the keynote of ICBC, Jamie Pearson, the founder and president of New Holland Group. Welcome.
Thank you, Sara. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here. It's so good to see you in real life. Because last time we saw each other was in Vegas.
Right.
And now we're in beautiful Barcelona. And you did a keynote this morning.
Yes, I did. I gave a keynote.
Will you tell our listeners what it was on?
My keynote was called Cultivating Unity, a Global Vision for Cannabis. And it was really about how we out here, because this particular conference has attendees from over 80 countries, between the Barcelona and the Berlin, the two conferences that he has. That's quite an international representation. When they asked me to give this keynote, I thought, how can I harness the collective brain power of the people that are here to move our industry forward? So I wrote a speech about how we do that, how we look at the intersection of sustainability, of health, and of economic empowerment, and where does all of that intersect with cannabis? And so I made the case for all of us to take a moment of intentionality, figure out where we are all from, where our region, how it contributes to cannabis. So for example, I have Colombian and Panamanian and Costa Rican cultivators that are clients of mine. I have American distributors. I have German medical facilities that import that cannabis. When we think about the global supply chain, and then we think about where that intersects with people at this conference, I wanted my keynote to actually empower people and give them some specific tips about what they can do to make their networking more meaningful. And so I gave everyone an assignment, and it is when they're out here today at Cannabis and every day at any conference, to introduce themselves on purpose to people they don't know, to ask them where they're from, what they're doing in the cannabis industry, to offer themselves up. Here's who I am, here's what I do, and then figure out in a conversation around the supply chain and around sustainability and around standardization, how can our two efforts individually have that conversation and move those things forward with a global supply chain in mind? So I know that's a mouthful, but I really wanted to be intentional about giving this keynote.
It's an essential conversation.
Absolutely.
I mean, when you think about all the people that are here and the different lenses through which they're seeing cannabis policy, cannabis business, and it's not just about the plant itself. They're coming from their cultures. And with that culture comes the love of the plant and the stigma. And we see the differences in the different countries about what's allowed, what's not allowed, where they are in their state of growth. And we can learn so much from one another.
We absolutely can. And we know that delegates from Germany have flown to California, flown to Colorado, and spoke with other regulators about what worked and what didn't. And then they have to go back and figure out how would what worked and what didn't apply to our culture, our set of rules under the EU, and things of that nature. So, the fact that we had people open the doors for them and say, "Oh, they learn from us." Those are the kind of things that move our industry forward. One of the things, though, that Judge Jones is still, and I did say in my talk, and this is something I believe, and the listeners out there may not agree with me, but I think we need to stop talking about the stigma, because I think words are powerful and you breathe life into the things that we talk about. And we need to stop looking in the rearview mirror at where we came from. In that respect, I'm not saying don't learn from history and don't teach history, but I am saying I don't want to breathe life into the stigma anymore. What I'd rather do when I encounter the stigma is name it for what it is, which is ignorance. Because at this point, there's no excuse for someone being ignorant other than the fear that comes from what the stigma created. And if we're going to combat it, we have to start breathing life into the solution which is to be talking about cannabis as normal and as a part of all of the things that can be medicine, food, fuel, hempcrete, plastic. Cannabis is a magical plant.
Yeah.
All of the things that it can do for our population. So I think for the globe, so I think if we talk about it being normal and we catch ourselves talking about the stigma, I think those are the little micro changes that every single one of us can do to move the industry forward. It's sort of like not using the term black market, calling it illicit market. It's like not calling it recreational, calling it adult use. Because when we all start using the same vernacular and understand how powerful these words are, legislators aren't thinking about everyone recreating. They're thinking about everyone being adults and making adult choices. And I think using those terms correctly help us unify our voice.
Absolutely. I mean, as we evolve, we need a new lexicon. And I think you're right. I like the term adult use better too, because one of the things I noticed in the California market is when we got into legalization, a lot of people were thinking it was just going to be a stoner fest. But what I saw at that time being in retail was that more and more people were coming in and saying, hey, now I feel comfortable seeing if this will help me with sleep. Will it help me if I'm stressed? I can experiment with this and it's okay. It's permission to be able to be curious and get in touch with my body. I mean, that's kind of a gift.
Getting in touch with your empathy. I also find if I'm noodling a particularly complex problem that involves human beings, where I'm like, why did that person do that? And I'm, perplexed or flustered. I notice that if I usually drink a low dose beverage at night, I sit in front of the TV instead of my glass of wine that I used to. And I really just like the way it makes me feel. But more importantly, when I'm noodling that problem, usually I go, yeah, this going on, and I shouldn't make an assumption, and it's probably not all about me. And I've noticed that it just gives me more empathy. And what would the world, be if everyone could get in touch with a little bit more empathy for one another?
Oh, absolutely. It's a call to balance. And in this day and age, I think we need that more than ever because we get so distracted with everything going on, right?
It feels like the world's on fire. But
yeah,
it's also just how much about information that we have access to and where we're getting our information, algorithms, things like that. So just need to be mindful of it.
Yeah. I mean, that also goes back to just like in this time, like how we use our language really affects because it echoes out like a pebble in a pond.
It's vibration.
Yeah.
I'm very a big believer that where a thought goes and all it follows, as Deepak Chopra said years ago. And I think about we have a lot of movies now that are dystopian. And so our artists are putting dystopian realities into vibration. And I don't know how to ask the artists, the screenwriters, to figure out a way to make just how they make that interesting. They can make horror films interesting. They can make anything interesting and educational and fun and entertaining. But I feel like we need, as humanity, need to be focused more intentionally on utopia rather than dystopia. I think we need to be mindful about what vibration we put out into the universe. And I know I sound super woo-woo, but I have believed this. My parents have instilled these types of beliefs in me. And it boils all the way down to my kids will tell you, I'll drive somewhere that's busy. Oh, we're never going to get a parking spot. And there is always a spot for me in the front. But yeah, it works.
I hear that. So I do this. Jeff laughs at me because when we first got together, we'd be looking for parking. I live in the Bay, so parking is a premium.
Yeah.
And so I would do this thing where I would concentrate on it, and I would kind of like to get my mind into it. I kind of like move my hands a little bit, and he's like, "What are you doing? You're doing your doodlies," and he's to the point where it always gets a space. He's like, "All right, we're not too far from home. Start doing your doodlies."
Yeah, my son will say, "Oh, turn on your parking car, Mike. Here we go."
I love
but
that.
I feel like that same vibrational intention really applies to everything that we breathe life into. That's why I'm saying let's stop breathing life into the stigma. Stop giving that word power. Let's kill the stigma. Like literally killing the word and saying cannabis is normal.
Yeah.
You know, it's replacing something else.
Well, seeing all these wonderful people out here today, I feel like we're getting there.
Well, we are definitely people in this room are getting there. And I think part of what I believe my responsibility is when people ask me to come, give a talk or a speech or a moderate, is to really just be intentional. What is the vibrational energy I want everyone in the audience to go forth for the rest of the conference with? And how do I want to galvanize them? And so that's, I think my responsibility when I'm being asked to do that. So I take it very seriously. And I wrote that stage. Sometimes I talk about different things. This is the one I thought was appropriate in current political times. The fact that Germany's government is now forming its coalition in a pretty heavy time right now. And so I just wanted to be very clear with the audience about how much power this industry really holds on a global level across so many things like health, like sustainability, and like economic prosperity. I mean, I think about, you don't have to have a Silicon Valley address to make money in the cannabis industry if you're intentional about it. I know many people out there are not making money and not doing well, but many people are out there on a global scale making money, and it sort of belies the understanding that we need to figure out why it works in some places and why it doesn't in others, and start coming together to figure out how to benefit one another.
Well, in your role, you definitely bring people together.
Absolutely.
And I think part of being successful in this field is the spirit of collaboration and connection, even down to, the conversations that we see on LinkedIn about people being pro-hemp, people being pro-cannabis. And I often think if we could put all that aside and just work together, it would be amazing the amount of power that we would have to influence policy.
I couldn't agree more. I wanted to talk about that specifically in my talk, and I really was trying to weave it in. But interestingly enough, the hemp industry and the cannabis industry in Europe don't have those same fights. I feel like in the US, it's a little bit of a crab pot mentality where, hemp has figured out, and I'm not a fan of the word loophole either, but the way the law was written, people in the hemp community figured out how to work within the framework of what was allowed and created an industry that's very, very profitable out of that. And so then I think we have legal cannabis because the analogy that was explained to me that I know is simplistic and isn't perfect, but it really does illustrate how it works. All bananas start as green bananas, and all bananas end up being yellow bananas at some point. And hemp is green bananas. They're allowed to take their lab test a month before it's ripe, and it's forever called a green banana. And cannabis is not cannabis until it's a yellow banana. And once it's a yellow banana, it's subject to all kinds of crazy rules and taxes. So to me, if we're all selling bananas and they are all green bananas at some point, why wouldn't we say yellow bananas are medical cannabis because we need to hold the medical cannabis to a higher standard? And all green bananas are adult use bananas. And we've then, in that analogy or in that example, we already have legal cannabis. You can get Delta 9 THC products delivered right to your door through the USPS in the United States.
Thinking about expanding globally? New Holland Group helps you think big while staying grounded in compliance, culture, and safety. Strategic expansion done with purpose, experience, and integrity. Growing your cannabis business is exciting. Until it's not. Struggling with messy operations, supply chain chaos, or tough decisions? New Holland Group is here to help. They partner with founders and execs to untangle the hard stuff and scale with intention. Visit new-holland.group to learn more. That's new-holland.group.
Why on earth are the yellow banana people going after them? Why not join them? I was very happy to see Trulieve jump into the Delta 9 low-dose beverage race. I was happy to see GTI is now in it, and so is Curaleaf. And none of us are a champion of big corporate cannabis. However, I also think we should be champions of big corporate cannabis in the respects that it can benefit and help the entire industry. So if we could have a framework, we being all of the cannabis people that want to coexist, could figure out how could those MSOs who have access to the White House and gazillions of dollars, how could we figure out a way to make it beneficial for them? Because let's face it, they have influence, they have power, and they have money. And as much as we may not like that, that is the fact.
Yes.
So why wouldn't we figure out a way to make whatever they're doing beneficial for all of us, and what we're doing beneficial for them? So just like the hemp and cannabis people need to stop fighting, I think that the roots and the suits need to figure out a way to come together, because we can benefit each other tremendously.
Absolutely. There's gifts on both sides around that. And you're right. I mean, we can wish and hope and give all the facts and tell people how it benefits the human race. But the fact of the matter is, policy doesn't happen that serves an industry unless there's money and might behind it.
Absolutely.
And if we can do that, it's a runway to start maybe normalizing and taking back some of the draconian policies that's making it hard for the cannabis industry to survive.
For medical patients to get access.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think, yeah. I just think when people spend their energy, and it goes back to the vibrational conversation, but when they spend their energy being haters, they're injecting hate into the industry. So I understand when you have a conflict with someone that there is a benefit comes out of the conflict, and maybe a deeper understanding comes out of the conflict. But in the gotcha world of social media, and everyone's looking to have the upper hand or have the mic drop moment or whatever it is. I try to be intentionally positive and see the good in everything, like on purpose, because I don't want to spend my energy being angry or tearing someone down because I don't agree with them. I think those are private conversations. I think if you don't like the way one of the MSOs is handling their business, then contact that person privately, give them that information. But the question is, do you need to be the rallying cry for an entire group of people to tear that company down? Or do you need to figure out a way to work together?
Yeah.
And I'm always amazed at how much vitriol is out there and energy is wasted on the hate. The haters are out there hating, and I just don't see any benefit of that. So I'm always trying to be a bright light in the industry, make the path easier for those around me. And in the work that I do at the New Holland Group, where most of the work is either strategy with CEOs or in strategies usually around how do I get my company across this border? I'm a Spanish company. I want to be successful in America. Can you help me do that? Or I'm a brand in America and I would like to enter the German market. Can you help me do that? The answer is yes. My Rolodex is deep. I will say that because I've spent so much time building genuine relationships with people, I can pick up the phone most of the time, call somebody, and they'll see my name come across the phone, and they're going to pick up and say, "Hey, Jamie, what can I do for you?" And I'm not going to ask people to do things that are unreasonable. Typically, I'm making a connection that's beneficial for both people. And the people on the end of the phone know that there's probably something in it for them if they pick up the phone and talk to me. Right. And so that's exactly what I'm talking about. And you don't do that by tearing people down.
No, you don't. And I think, the people who get angry and kind of behave off the cuff and tear people down should sit and have a moment and ask themselves, what is the benefit of that?
Right.
Like, really, do you want a solution? Or is there something going on with you that's frustrating you and you just need to take it out on somebody, because you can have the conversations. And when you establish relationships, you can have transparency and you can create change. I mean, that's one of the things that I love, like working with clients. And if there's a misunderstanding, establishing that transparency so that you can see where one another's coming from and learn from one another. It's
magic happens in the deals. I just put a deal together between a French guy and an American guy and a Spanish guy. And they're all alpha males. They're all run giant companies. And like the dumbest thing is who has to go to whom? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where I'm good at what I do is I know who has to go to whom, and I know why, and I can give someone that information and say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to him, and here's why we're going to go to him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I can prep these conversations where that other CEO or the other two CEOs understand this isn't disrespect or deference or whatever it is. This is how this works in this part of the world. And, you know, it's like a cultural translation, because sometimes understand when they make those missteps that it's going to take years to recover when the backdoor conversation is, oh, that guy's so arrogant, or that, you know, that's where you can make or break these initial introductions. And sometimes people assume, oh, it should just be easy. Everyone's going to come and sit together and have a conversation and they're going to do business. No, what actually needs to happen is you come sit down and you figure out what do you have common with one another. And you've got to make a relationship and build a little bit of rapport and trust. And you can't just jump right into the business. You can, but you haven't built that trust, right? And the basis for when the relationship eventually gets battle tested, because all the good ones have been battle tested, you have somebody who will go into battle with you. And you have to start on moment one to build that relationship and that trust. And one of the things I think I do is I translate the cultures pretty well, because I've lived 25 years off and on in Europe and in the US. I speak German, raise my kids with German passports, German language, and put them in school over here. And man, I've had some painful education so that my clients don't have to have that.
You're like an international diplomat.
Yeah, I would say so, for sure.
I love that.
Yeah. I love some cultures. It's not acceptable to do business if you haven't smoked together. Some cultures, it's not acceptable to smoke and do business. Right. And then how do you handle someone who doesn't smoke? And you're in a culture where you need to smoke and do business. And then I know, well, in this culture, it's acceptable to say this. Right. And so when a company comes to me, they're sitting there thinking about, how do I convert euros to dollars? And like, that stuff's easy. This is the stuff we're talking about, the soft skills of cultural nuance that make or break a relationship or a potential contract.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you approach somebody, most people, I'm not to say everybody, with a purely transactional energy, not a lot is going to happen.
Yeah. I had to learn that the hard way, because I've found out recently, no joke, I've been to ICBC, and I didn't know that was
what? I take notes when I talk to you. I'm like, all right, I need to be less laid back. This is what Jamie's doing.
I'm sorry about that. I'm a work in progress as well. And that is kind of hard. I'm not going to lie, because I didn't see myself that way at all. And what's funny is when the moment happened where I had this realization, a few members of my family were around, and they laughed knowingly. And I'm like, wait a minute, you think so? And then they laughed again. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm type A. Okay, well, what does that mean exactly? And is it a good thing? Should I not be type A? And my boyfriend said, oh, that's a very type A response to just. So anyway, and what I'm learning is, and what I've learned over the 25 years is that being type A, whatever you want to call it, being who I am benefits me in some regards and doesn't. And so I have to be self-aware about where my pitfalls are, because I just want to jump in and do business and have a tendency to be transactional because I'm moving on, move really fast. I've made the introduction, this should go happening. If you need me to help you facilitate whatever I've just put together, keep me in the loop. But most of the time, people that I'm connecting with, the minute they're connected and they know what each other does, they got it from there. So I'm not perfect, right? But I want to be. I'm out here doing the best I can every day. But what I want to be more than perfect is approachable and accessible. And I want people in the community to know that if they need something, I'm here to make their path easier. That's my intention in the world. So, if you're out there and you're listening and you think, man, I wish she would give me 5 minutes because I want to know this about Germany, or I want to know that about Spain. I don't hide my number. I don't hide my emails everywhere. So I use it.
And you just had a pitch event recently, correct?
Yeah, I am emceeing there's a new company that started called the Tallman Group, which is part of the Tallman House. And the Tallman Group is an investor private club. You have to join and be a member. The people in the audience, for example, we're going to have another event in Berlin. We're expecting somewhere between 100 and 150 that have already confirmed investors, family offices, private equity companies, VCs, individual investors, angels. We've got the whole gamut in the room. We've got some institutional investors as well. Because what Tallman's doing, I think, is really smart, is they're running Shark Tank style pitch contests, but they're weeding out the riffraff, pun intended. They're making sure that the decks that are being pitched are actually investable, so that you don't sit there and waste your time thinking that you're going to listen to six pitches and there's going to be a bunch of garbage. There's no garbage. There's no aspirational companies that have $40 million valuations pre-revenue, without patents or something, valuable. So we're running these companies through their paces and making sure that the content's curated. And then the people that are pitching are practicing and they're refining their pitches because they're 8 minutes. And then what I think is really cool is then Tallman organizes experts. So if you've got somebody pitching about cultivation in Portugal, got somebody that's going to talk before the pitch happens about what are the nuances of cultivation in Portugal and how does that integrate into the EU. So then as an investor listening to the information about here's the framework, and then the guy gets up and pitches, or the woman gets up and pitches whatever opportunity they have with cultivation in Portugal, for example. And you as an investor are already been given that primer, and it makes what you're hearing a little bit more understandable. Because a lot of the investors that come to the table are some of them are very, very well versed in cannabis, but that doesn't mean they're well versed in cultivation. So some investors say, I don't invest in cultivation, using that same example. But then they must, because now they understand why this is an opportunity where before, if they hadn't understood it, they just say, I'm just not going to invest in that area. So there's a lot of benefit on both sides of the aisle. Obviously, the companies pitching have access to capital and don't have to go on a roadshow because the roadshow goes to them. And then you also have, the investor benefits because they get to hear 6 really, really good investable pitches. Not only that, if they're running a fund or something like that, they've got 6 potential portfolio companies where they go, if I make this strategic investment with what I've already invested in, maybe they understand where there's, a key fitting in a keyhole for what's going to unlock their whole portfolio. It's really interesting and exciting and fun. And then, of course, it's all done in these fabulous 5-star hotels, which, for me is great because it's hard to be out on the road all the time. So when I'm like, I get to do a Tallman event. That means I'm going to have like 800 bread couches, caviar in the breakfast bar.
That's awesome. I would like that too.
So it's been really fun. And I've really enjoyed that work. Because I've been on both sides of that equation. When I was running Bang, which is a public company, having to go out and talk to investors all the time. So I know what it's like to pitch. And I've learned a lot along the way. I also write checks. So when I'm the investor, I know what I look for. I know where most of the time when the pitches come to me, where they're lacking. So I feel like I'm bringing knowledge from both sides of that equation in a way that can help both the investor that's in the room and the pitching.
That's really empowering on both sides.
Yeah.
One thing that I've noticed with the US market, I had several friends that were angel investors in the early days of legalization and in California, like at the very end of the 215 days. And there was a lot of exhaustion because we were all learning, and people were losing money and then they were exhausted. They're like, I don't know that I want to do this anymore. Although in theory, it sounds exciting. And so now with the work that you're doing with this, you're getting all of that out of the way. You're empowering people with that education so that we can continue these conversations and have that support grow.
It's super important because so many people have lost money. And there's a lot of angry investors out there who feel like they've been burned. And I have a different approach. And believe me, I'm one of them. I've had a number of investments that went from really, really sounding great to just bankrupt. That's tough, but I also didn't have illusions. It's like having run a cannabis company, I know how hard it is in the regulatory environment, the tax environment to make money. And I will tell you from my perspective, I tried not to waste a single dollar of any investor's money. I was a very good steward of resources. A great example is throwing parties. Bang threw amazing parties. We always had sponsors. Can brought their beverage. We were just really good at figuring out how to make those cooperative agreements. And we had so many people in the room, that have moved forward because they were in that room, that owed a debt of gratitude to Bang, that talked about Bang. Our name was all over everyone's tongue all the time. And I just think when you do, when you're a good resource for investors, and I would tell them, this room cost me $300 and here's how. And they're always like, oh, that's so great. Then it gives them a little bit of confidence. But in the term of where the investment conversation needs to go, I think investors need to understand that cannabis entrepreneurs didn't have a playbook to follow. And they were literally blazing a trail into a new frontier. And some of it was excitement. Some of it was maybe unbridled optimism that we've now since, beat our head against the wall or had our hand legislatively slapped. The realities of the industry are what they are. But and maybe there are examples that are bad out there. I'm sure we all think of MedMen as an example of somebody that, people like to vilify, but I don't know these men. I don't want to speak that they went into it trying to build an investor on purpose. I feel like they went in and they were following a playbook from some other industry. We see it a lot. Well, in alcohol, this worked. In pharmacy, this worked. Or in whatever. I used to be a capital markets guy, and that worked, right?
Right.
Cannabis is its own animal. And so you bring a playbook to cannabis and it says, nope, and it spits you out, right? And is that a sign of terrible leadership? Is that a sign of intentional bad faith? Or is that a sign that the industry chewed you up and spit you out because it's still figuring out what it is right now? We're still operating in prohibition. So for those investors out there that have lost money, I'm not trying to be Pollyanna and paint everything as rosier than it really is, but I am saying just take a step back and understand that people are generally good. People generally had really, really hopeful, good ideas, and they came from a place where they thought those ideas were going to work enough to where you wrote a check. And so you have some responsibility in that as well. So every time I think about the money I've lost with the companies out there. And there's one in particular, as CEO sent out a letter to everybody and let us all know that she was closing the doors. She felt terrible. I reached out, I called her and I said, hey, I had my big boy pants on when I wrote that check. And I'm sorry that you've lost your company, because I know for a fact this was not the vision you had for yourself. And please understand, it's okay. And you got a PhD now in that sector of cannabis. I don't want to give it away, but it is. She cried on the phone because think about the weight of what she was carrying because her company failed.
Right.
Right. And through no fault of her own, I would say, honestly, there were maybe some missteps that we know with hindsight. But every decision she made, she did it to the best of her ability. And she came out of a very successful Silicon Valley tech career. She knows her shit. Right. This was a perfect storm of COVID and regulation and taxation and, all the things. And so I'm not sitting here, I'm bummed I lost that money, but I'm not looking to blame somebody. You know what I mean? And I think I learned a lesson in all of that. So it might have been an expensive education, but, not as expensive as an Ivy League education, right? So true.
Yeah. Well, and as we evolve and we are developing our best practices. Remember in the 90s when a lot of things were happening with tech and a lot of culture and best practices started getting out into other industries and just changing the way we did business in general.
Yeah.
And if you were to look into a crystal ball, what impact do you think we're going to have with best practices and how people do business outside of our industry?
I think the earlier conversation we had about being transactional, because I think in non-cannabis industry, I come from real estate. Look, in every industry, it's great not to be transactional, but in many profit-focused industries, it's completely acceptable to be transactional. And in some cases, it's considered efficient, right? So let's not waste any time with all that, mumbo jumbo. Let's get down to business. In many industries, that would not be considered rude or inappropriate. But in this industry, it's not the way people do business. It is very common that, people smoke together while they're doing contracts. And I think that we're going to have that legacy that we bring into mainstream business is really figuring out how to foster real, genuine connection. And when you have real genuine, tend to be more win-win. And when they're win-win, the deals are more solid. And I think that's a great lesson to us.
Yeah, I totally agree. And just looking out at everybody today, what are your greatest hopes for this week where we're all convened in this beautiful place?
That we all live to see the day where cannabis is globally legal.
Love that. Thank you so much for everything you do.
Thanks.
And thank you for joining me today. And I'm really looking forward to the day that we have to sit down and geek out in a much longer episode.
It would be my pleasure. Thank you so much, Sara, for having me.
Thank you, Jamie.
Emerald Village, West Hollywood, the heart of cannabis culture in Los Angeles. From the first legalized dispensaries to the nation's first cannabis cafe, WeHo leads the way. Visit legacy spots like AHHS, LAPCG, and MedMen. The fresh vibes at Calma, Urban Leaf, and Green Queen. Chill at lounges like The Artistry, OG Cannabis Cafe, Off the Charts, Pleasure Med, and The Woods. Emerald Village WeHo, the world's 5-star cannabis destination. Your elevated escape awaits.
And we're back.
Sí, vale.
How's it going?
Fantástico. Me gusta la gente y las personas y la comida y el networking de los international cannabis industry.
Jeez, Ngaio, your Spanish is way better than mine, and my verb conjugations leads.
Keep everything in the present tense.
I love it.
We're not talking fast or future. My Spanish is very now. It's very zen.
I like that. Be here now.
Nah. I can't conjugate for shit. You say conjugate, I'm like, what? Did someone get married in prison? I don't know what you mean. Oh, that's conjugal.
That's
My bad.
conjugal.
My bad.
Yeah.
English is only my first language.
But I see where you're going with.
You smell what I'm cooking.
That's right. That's right.
Conjugational visits. They happen in the past, present, and the perfect.
That's it. And for those of you listening in,
It's scrawled in the perfect.
they're perfect. I'm guest on our show before, and he is the MC of ICBC.
I am. I'm the MC of the International Cannabis Business Conference. I've been here since it was the Oregon Medical Marijuana Business Conference in Ashland in like 2015, 2014, something like that. So shout out to the whole ICBC team for taking a local event and making it national.
Right?
Or international.
Talk about bridging the gap.
Right. Berlin is going to be crazy off the hook this year. Spain is always great. It's fantastic to see how the industry has changed and how so many people have come together from all over the world. There's always strength in numbers.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe you learned something from somebody in Colombia that you can apply to how you're doing it in Germany or Switzerland. And I was just talking to a guy today. They're growing hash in Morocco and making like medical grade hashish that they're going to start selling to the Switzerland Medical Cannabis Program.
Wow.
Right. So the Swiss are going to get Moroccan hash at the stores before the Americans. That's the thing. I'm always like, we need to legalize cannabis super internationally so that I can pop down to my local club and buy some Spanish haze and some Moroccan hash. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or some New York Blue Lobster, some Oregon Jägermeister. In the same way that you can buy an Australian wine or a Dutch beer, you should be able to buy international kinds of weed because people have different styles, the things they like to grow, the techniques, the methods, the flavors. It should be international and yet super local at the same time. I know that sounds weird, but it's true. Really more like beer and less like cigarettes. I think I'm kind of rambling right now.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. So am I.
One of the challenges is because you smoke weed, because weed is smoked, people tend to, especially regulators, tend to think of it as a cigarette. But it's not really a cigarette. It's more like a beer where there's local flavors, there's local styles. The French beer is different than a German beer, which is different than an American steam style, which is different than an IPA. You know, and we should have more micro literies.
Yes.
Right? Small batches. This push toward monopolization and giant corporations. Well, I get it. Cannabis is great when it's decentralized.
Yes.
Right? Because this, I don't know if anyone's ever learned anything from the story of the Cavendish banana, but we used to have a lot more different kind of bananas we could get. And
Sure.
then now we have one, and we're going to run out of that one because all the shit is dying. Right?
Yeah.
Because Mother Nature hates a monopoly.
Yeah. She does not like a monopoly.
She does not.
And, you think about like when we start to see like a lot of cultivars, the same things everywhere. Wouldn't it be nice to see cultivars that actually do really well in certain environments?
Well, they do. And that was one of the challenges. My understanding was when Uruguay first legalized, they brought a lot of Canadian seeds. They brought a lot of seeds from Canada to grow. Canadian weed has a whole different, needs
Yeah.
than Uruguay might provide. The air is different. The growing season's different. The temperatures are different. So, those Canadian seeds, it's a good start, but you're going to have to do some genetic manufacturing and manipulationing. That's a word. I made that word up.
I like it. I like where you're going with that.
Right? Manipulating to create something that's good for Uruguay.
Right. Well, wouldn't it
Right,
be
it's
nice?
good for everyone.
Yeah, to have like varietals that Uruguay. See, I caffeinated as well.
Nice.
That they excel in. But then going back to the international part, you could get some Canadian cultivars that were grown in Canada, and then maybe some charas.
Yeah. Why not some charas? Always the charas. I love the finger hash. Makes me miss being a trimmer sometimes. I don't miss the repetitive stress injuries. And it doesn't pay what it used to, but
It definitely
it
does.
used to be a good time. It was definitely a good time. For sure.
For
sure.
So I know every gathering has things.
I think that one of the cool things about the ICBC is that every year we get people from more and more different countries. So when you walk around listening to all the languages being spoken, there's so many different people. Sorry, my friend is here and you have to go give her a pass. But let me text her. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
So that's what I think. I just like that you see the international world grow more and more and more. Like we had a whole delegation from Thailand last year, and now we got cats. Just on one of the panels today, there we had and a guy from Uruguay. There's a lady from Mexico. There's a dude from Colombia, and a dude from Spain, all sitting in the panel. That's international, baby. That's 4 different countries. You know what I mean? On 2 different sides of the world. Right? 3, really. If you count Mexico as more North America than South America. So there's South America, Europe, and North America. Bang, bang, boom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that for me is what's great, because I always think that cannabis is supposed to bring people together, right? Subculture of every other subculture. Like I always say, I probably said that on the podcast already. Whatever it is people like to do, there's a group of people who like to get high and do that shit.
It's a good message to keep talking about.
All right, get high and do that shit, everybody. And the guy else says so. Unless it's like brain surgery or driving a school bus, then, keep your wits about you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well,
I know you've got to go, but I'm glad you popped in for a minute.
Another 27 minutes, and I haven't eaten yet this morning, and I got to let my friend in and all those sort of things. So, hey, thank you so much, Sarah. And we love you, and I'll see you at Choco tomorrow.
That sounds good. Love you too, man.
Okay, ciao.
Bye.
Blimburn Seeds has been a trusted name in cannabis genetics since 2002 with roots in the US and Spain. In addition to our premium seeds, we offer clones, THC flowers and pre-rolls, and professional nutrients designed for every stage of the grow cycle, shipped fast, secure, and guaranteed worldwide. Explore over 1,000 strains in curated packs designed to help you grow with confidence and pride. Catch our 3-part series featuring a live interview from Barcelona with
Hello, everyone, and we're
Sergio
back.
Martinez.
We are live at
Only on
ICBC. Planted with Sarah Pion is in Barcelona. And today I have a very special guest. And excuse the noise, there's a lot of fun things going on here. Delia Flanagan. She is a global business development professional from New Garden and also pharma. Mm-hmm. And she is a researcher of regenerative agriculture and a fellow Bay Arean. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So nice to have some Bay Area energy here in Barcelona with us.
What I find really exciting is having people from the Bay doing international work, because San Francisco is a very international city.
Yes.
And, with everything that happened with cannabis, they're seeing people going forward and doing things in other countries. It's super, super exciting.
Yes, it's vital for us to all, understand that we're all trying to grow accessibility and cleanliness and of this plant medicine. And, the European market is just in its very early days, and living over here now for 2 years, it's amazing to see how many people have dedicated their whole lives to this plant. Growing up and primarily working in California, we have this kind of like ethnocentrism when it comes to cannabis and us being the Mecca over there, which definitely it's inevitable that so much of the world's knowledge of cannabis does come from California. But it's incredible to me. I'm based in Athens, meeting some activists who have been working for the, betterment of this plant since the 1960s there, advocating for patient rights, making it actually medically legal in 2017, and now working so hard primarily against the government to create greater accessibility. We all need to be in this together in order to make it happen, because there's still a long way to go over here with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I think we find as we start to develop policy throughout the world is we see how much of the individual lenses influence that.
Absolutely.
And how culture is such an important part of that. Because even in the United States, like going around doing policy work in different states, to me, it really underlined the fact that the states are kind of almost like different countries and cultures themselves.
Yes, they are.
And then you take it out of the states, and how different has it been for you? What has it been like?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up with 2 American parents who went to Woodstock 1969. So the culture of cannabis, it was very easy to tell my mother and father that this was my professional career path, and they couldn't be any more proud. Now I'm based in Greece, and even though it might be a part of still the underground culture, the boomer generation still has such a big, question mark and stigma with it.
And in addition to that, the history of medicine couldn't be any more rich in Greece and ancient Greece with Hippocrates and all of the founders of Fiji, and so traditional and old school. So even though, medical cannabis has been legalized since 2017, the doctors still do not want to, change what they've been doing for thousands of years over there and understand that this totally new paradigm could be entering into their field. And so that makes it really difficult because, a lot of the patient advocacy groups are really in need of this medicine. To see them fight so hard. I mean, we've seen the same struggles happen all throughout the States, but because the States is so much younger as a nation and as a country, it's much easier to just introduce new concepts, even though there's a lot of resistance at first. And so, yeah, representing that I'm a, global cannabis professional and like my inner circles, it definitely has more of a wow reaction. But that also provides so much more opportunity. And really why I'm in Greece in particular is because of the rich agricultural landscape. And so I'm getting my Master's of Science in Sustainable Agriculture and Business from a Greek university, while I'm also doing business development for New Garden Pharma, which is an EU GMP facility in North Macedonia. And the opportunity, particularly for greenhouses, because greenhouses in particularly the island of Crete are I think they have the largest amount of greenhouses in the world and produce and export like so many tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers year round, like because of the sun and because of the soil conditions. They're really, it's incredible how luscious the food is and the food quality in Greece. I mean, the soil is super clean. Of course, there's a lot of climate change threats and a lot of things that inhibit, the ultimate prosperity. But recognizing that reality and seeing also a niche that I like to fill in this space is trying to facilitate that connection between agriculture and the medical market, because, that often gets lost. And I'm a big believer, as we first connected this morning on my alma mater of Rose Delights in San Francisco, I know so much about the importance, or I feel so much the importance of clean cannabis products. And that starts with the soil, that starts with the cultivation, that continues to the manufacturing, clean ingredients. And so when I look at like the Greek food supply system and seeing how many farmers there are and seeing how people just naturally eat more clean because of the accessibility they have to such luscious food, and the opportunity for this vital medicine to be more accessible, I see, a lot of motivation inside of me for putting all those links together.
That's exciting. What do you think as far as, when we talk about like appellations and terroir, especially when we're looking at outdoor cultivation, do you see that in Greece's future?
That's a very good question. There's actually not that much recording of cannabis per se. Actually, I've been getting down the rabbit hole with the story of ancient Greece and the road to Eleusis and this psychedelic barley drink that they were consuming at the time of ancient past. And the more that you try to dig into the truths of what was happening there agriculturally, you're seeing a lot of barley, you're seeing a lot of grapes, you're seeing a lot of wine, you're seeing a lot of herbs and herbal medicine. Like dittany is one of the most powerful herbs we have in this world, and it primarily only grows in Crete. And there's just so much you can look into and make. But when it comes to cannabis, I know there must be some like heirloom genetics from there. But I think when it comes to the development of cannabis in that region, I think following the concept of the greenhouse model would be really, really strong, just to be able to capture the sun. I think like the sun in that regard is going to be more of a vital factor than sourcing some local genetics. But that's the beautiful thing about breeding and strain hunting in general. I mean, I think we can always find a terroir that, can cultivate the best of those specific strains. I do know in North Macedonia, where I work, apparently the climate of North Macedonia highlights or matches the Oregon climate. And so there's someone coming and bringing in Oregon genetics to cultivate outdoors there.
That's exciting.
And that will be pretty exciting. But unfortunately, and another reason why I'm really trying to fill this niche of connecting the agricultural reality to this European medical market is indoor cultivation naturally is the way people are generally building this space over here for the reasons that we know, in terms of efficiency and cost efficiency and maximization. So that's another thing that I want to push is the importance of outdoor cultivation.
Yeah, it is. I mean, because indoor cultivation, although, because of the way we are in the States, like, all the cannabis stays in its state that it's cultivated. So, of course, Arizona is going to need indoor cultivation because there are only so many cultivars in so many areas that can be. But when you have the opportunity to do outdoor cultivation, whether it's greenhouse or in the open, it's significantly lessening the impact on resources.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the benefits just go down the line. So part of my research is looking at how cannabis and hemp contribute to agricultural health, starting with the soil, but also I'm looking in and honing in specifically on the effect to grapevines and wine vines, because the wine industry is so rampant in Greece and in the surrounding regions, like in Italy as well. And they're suffering because of climate change, more and more diseases and fungal diseases and just decreased resilience that they once had. And so trying to showcase through agricultural lens how much having this plant benefits all the other plants and all the entire ecosystem and biodiversity, and the list goes on, the more hopefully people can see that outdoor cultivation isn't just, a good solution for the humans, but also for the entire environment and the surrounding region. And so, yeah, it's just the stigmas, and the resistance. When you're looking at Greece in particular, like ancient Greece has been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And so to introduce new ways of thinking, I find is so much more difficult than in other places that I've lived in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. When you have a rich, strong history and culture, it's kind of like, if it's worked this long, why change it?
True. Although it's so chaotic and maybe this could, it, it's also interesting because I know that want change. We have the resistance. We are born into these structures and we're here to evaluate them and either destroy them, rebuild them, or recreate them in some way. And this plant is a supremely connecting factor. And that's why it's so nice to have international conferences like this where you are meeting people from the Bay Area, from, some people are here from Dubai, some people are here from France, some people are here from Morocco, from Germany, from Colombia. And like, if you look at just like a global or bird eye view of the globe, we are all our own, pioneers in this path. And that's why it's vital to formulate these international bonds and these international connections. And also at the same time, prosper the capital aspect of this, because unfortunately, that's the only way that these politics will really align with what we need when we can show economic benefit to them. And yeah, it's a long fight, but we've seen so many different, gross evolutions, some devolutions, but a lot of evolution in general in the States. For where we were 10 years ago to where we are today, California is a sad story. I think it was like a little bit too fast, too soon.
Cautionary tale.
Yeah, that's a whole nother discussion. But in general, when you look at the states, I'm from Massachusetts originally. We have, I lived in Virginia. You have all these states that 10, 15 years ago, there was no aspect of dispensary or access to medicine. And now I think maybe how many states you can actually have access to medicine. I think we're only missing 4 or 5 where it's completely illegal. And
it's very few. And then there's a few that are just hemp CBD, which, hey, whether we're talking about hemp or cannabis, it's the same plant.
We need to be more people who've been working in it for a decade or more, get really bogged down and really overwhelmed by how much it doesn't work or how many roadblocks we've encountered. It's nice to feel a little bit more sense of optimism on this side of the pond because they're just getting started in a way, but they also encounter roadblocks every day because they're building it throughout a whole continent over here. but we have to just take a bird's eye view always and just look at how much progress we have made.
Yeah, absolutely. And having conferences like ICBC is an amazing opportunity for us to learn from one another and share ideas and get to better understand the lenses through which we're all seeing the world. Because if you only see through your own lens, how far can you go?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know. I also am I'm looking forward to help propel different form factors over here, particularly the edibles category, as we connected again on Rose Delights and Rose. And
I love Rose Delights and just the whole artistic concept.
Yes, exactly.
That's, I think, a direction that we should be really encouraging.
Exactly. From a normalization standpoint and a health standpoint. I mean, because we're working in strict medical market, and unlike the United States, where the states that are medical, it's quite simple. You get a doctor to give you a medical card, and then you have access as the patient of your own agency. Of course, they make recommendations, but you can go into a medical dispensary and kind of pick and choose. In Europe, the process differs country to country, so it's much more strict, and the doctor has to prescribe you a specific medicine, just like a regular pharmacy. Prescription process. So once we can introduce and normalize more of these tinctures and oral capsules and oral form and even transdermal patches like this, we've seen, especially in the elder generation in America, so much relief in every state of people who have access to this. And that's why it's so important for me to carry these around and show people and have them try it and be like, yes, edibles don't have to be that space cake from Amsterdam. They can be low dose as well.
Yeah, and they can taste pleasant. You don't have to hold your nose while you choke them down.
Yes. And think about like a concept of this being made with the European ingredients.
That would be so exciting. I'm so glad that you joined me today. Will you come back so we can do a longer conversation when we get back to our homes?
Absolutely, Sarah. Thank you so much for being here and for spreading your beautiful energy and letting us have a moment to just talk together and a conscious conversation rather than just trying to pass around our business cards on the show floor.
Oh, I've had so much fun with you. And thank you for being here. And thank you for spreading of your wealth of information and just really getting the conversations going.
You bet. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Are you looking for a lasting, meaningful way to connect with your audience and highlight your brand? Well, listen up, because Planted with Sara Payan is taking on new sponsors. Here's a powerful stat. 20% of listeners are more likely to support brands they hear about on a trusted podcast. And 60% actually look up that product after hearing about it. That's the power of podcasting. Planted with Sara Payan has a unique draw. With remarkable guests, we attract and engage audience that spans all sides of the cannabis spectrum. Picture your message reaching these listeners time and again. Podcast ads are evergreen, meaning your brand stays relevant as new audiences discover and binge past episodes. It's a long-term investment that keeps on giving. If you're looking for a targeted, passionate audience with lasting impact, the right listeners are here waiting to meet your brand. Visit plantedwithsara.com to get a copy of our sponsorship deck today.
Hello, everyone, and we're back. We are live at ICBC. Planted with Sara Payan is in Barcelona, and I have Rebecca Allen Tapp, straight out of Portugal, of Paralab Green. Welcome, Rebecca. I am so excited to see you. Can I just tell you?
I feel the same way. We've been talking for so long. It's so wonderful to finally meet you in person. And that's like part of the conference magic, right? Like, it's just like, it's like summer camp, I feel like.
It is. And it's so, we're all talking from all different parts of the world. We get together, we see each other in real life, and then we get to meet other wonderful people and find out what they're doing. And I just think that is the best. It just doesn't get better than that.
Oh, yeah. I get a lot of my information on what's happening around the world while at conferences. It's kind of like a check-in. Like, you can take the pulse of the different like regulatory landscapes, especially in this ever-changing industry. I feel like conferences give us the opportunity to get that check-in that we normally wouldn't get other than like LinkedIn or reading reports.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know for those of you listening, Rebecca is going to be back and we're going to do a longer episode. But what do you see coming from the US market going into Europe? What are some of the things that are inspiring you? And what have been some of the things that you feel like you brought to the table coming over here? What's the trajectory been like?
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster, honestly. I came from more the recreational side of the business, so I really didn't know what I was walking into when I moved over to the UK 3 years ago, because I wasn't sure how to navigate the regulatory landscape. It was very patchwork across Europe. I wasn't sure where it was legal, what was legal. So I had to kind of hit the ground running. And I felt like the best way to do that was getting boots on the ground, getting involved from an advocacy standpoint, and really immersing myself in the local policy reform movements. So it was really hard for me to kind of check my recreational point of view, even though I had been using cannabis medicinally. I didn't really self-identify as a patient. So getting into that headspace where I had to reevaluate how I spoke about cannabis and my own personal relationship with it, so that I didn't, further the stigma or off-put people with my relationship with the plant. So there was definitely some adjustment period for me upon arriving across the pond.
Yeah, I can't imagine. It would be, I know, like even yesterday, I went to my first club.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and it was a trip. I mean, it was very cool. And just looking at the different things that were available, and it just, I felt like after years of working in a dispensary, I felt like that annoying person that used to come in and just ask about everything.
I totally get it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I was also I was very excited to see that even though they had THC rich products, they also had CBD products as well, which we're seeing less and less of in the States in dispensaries. They're more in the hemp stores. And I think that it's a big oversight for us in the United States.
Yeah, it's leaning more like high THC, which is not, it's only capturing a percentage of the users. I totally relate. Actually, my first conference in Europe after moving here was Cannabis, was Conference Week in Barcelona 3 years ago. And I had the same experience where I went to a club, I went to Choco for the first time, and I walked in, and it was really eye-opening for me, because the clubs here are not all marked. It was like a warehouse door with like spray paint on it, and like a ring bell on the outside. Like the concept of the membership and the language barrier, and there was a lot of things that were new to me that really opened my eyes to how people are accessing cannabis outside the US. And it's really one of those things that I think everyone in the industry should experience if they're able to kind of deepen their relationship with the plant, is to get out and see how other cultures and other regions are handling the hurdles of prohibition.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just put out a new paper.
I did. Yes. I did a report recently. Well, it's a guidebook, I would call it. It's around 37 pages of information that I've collected over the last decade that I've been in the cannabis industry. And the purpose behind it was to remove any barriers to knowledge that I feel like people experience with terminology and things that are, specific to the cannabis industry. So, what is the plant? What are the chemical compounds? What are the different types of cannabinoids? How does the plant grow and the growth cycles? Or how is it extracted? How can it be consumed? And I found this to be really interesting, because a lot of people just assume that it's only for people just entering the industry. But I find that there are friends of mine who, work in the industry that are more on the clinic side. They're like, what is the difference between a live resin and a live rosin? And so it's not just specific for people that are getting into the industry. It's really to help those who are looking to expand their knowledge from a high level and, just get enough to say, oh, okay, well, this is an interesting area for me. Now I want to dig deeper and just, create some inspiration to build a deeper understanding of these terminologies and how the products are made, where they come from, and just, have that all in one place.
Yeah, I think that is so important. And you're right, because a lot of people are coming into cannabis with their own set of skills that they're contributing. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they understand everything about the products available, the different extractions, what that means. And I still hear people who are interested in cannabis talking about cannabis leaves. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Or the argument of what's a full spectrum or a broad spectrum.
Right.
That's something. And some of these terms are so loose that I feel like they're used interchangeably and then shouldn't be used interchangeably. So that was really my drive behind this. And it was really for me to give back. I mean, this is out there for free. It's, I spent 5 months getting it all down, in writing, and then had the excellent Sara Sinclair go through and edit it. So I was able to, give one of my very talented colleagues some business as well, and have her helping with this project, and then release it out into the world for free, so that it can just be a guide for anyone who's interested. They can brush up or familiarize themselves.
I love that. For people who want to access it, how can they do that?
Yeah, so they can go to my website, which is www.rt, like Rebecca Tapp, consultingsolutions.com. And on there, if you scroll down, there's a download now button, and it'll be right there. It's automatic, so you don't have to go check your email for it. It'll just automatically take you to that page.
That's awesome. I'm so glad that we have conferences like ICBC that bring all together. What are your goals here? What are you hoping to do while you're visiting?
So my goals now, I think this is like I said, my third go around. I have had the opportunity to really make my name in the space in Europe and dig into this niche. And now I want to pay that forward and help others who I know that are turning their interest over to the European market, or ones that are already here that are expanding. I want to help my friends and colleagues connect and have meaningful conversations and continue to see this industry succeed and thrive. I think that without us working together and fighting the scarcity mindset and really practicing the, collaboration over competition mindset, that's going to be the key to our success. So my goal is to spend more time getting to know people, finding out what they're doing, checking in, and then seeing who I can connect them with, which I know will only bring more business back my way just by, the natural flow of business karma.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. It's all hands on deck. Our lenses are so important, and we have to help each other. I mean, we need to look at an abundance mindset rather than scarcity. I know it's a little challenging, but if we work together, we can make amazing things happen.
For sure. For sure. Only the passionate are going to survive. So, find out people's why. Why did you get in this industry? What are you doing? And get to know each other and how we can support one another, not just looking at every opportunity as what can someone do for me? Also, what can I do for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I am all about those life-giving relationships that are not transactional. It's more about connecting and seeing how we can help one another and creating those just really strong bonds and friendships.
Exactly. There's more, there's more currency than just monetary. Connections are currency as well. So I think that it's really important to change your mindset.
Speaking of connections, I'm really grateful for our friendship, and I'm so glad. So glad to see you. And I'm looking forward to sitting down and just geeking out with you on a full episode very soon.
Yeah, same here. And I can't wait to see and listen to all the amazing conversations you're going to have here, because it's so many of my friends and colleagues that I've gotten to know, and I can't wait for them to get their information across the pond and for you to get to know our industry over here a little bit more. It's going to be awesome.
Oh, I'm so excited. Well, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And have so much fun. We're going to have so much fun this week.
Oh, it's going to be a blast. I can't wait.
And we're back. Planted with Sara Pion is broadcasting live at ICBC. in beautiful Barcelona. And I have Beau Whitney. He's an economist and he is from Whitney Economics. I have heard of Beau before we met, and I was told that this is the man to talk to geek out about economics and how it affects policy and so much more. So, Beau, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today.
I'm glad that we've been able to finally get together and do this. So thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. So what are you excited about with ICBC this week?
Well, I've been, for the longest time, I've been involved in the analysis of the cannabis market. And I initially started off just by doing state by state analyses. But now I've got a forecast and a supply estimate for the total market for every country in the world.
Wow.
And the value of every market in the world. And so I've been presenting data on that. And so ICBC has been kind enough to invite me to Berlin and to Barcelona for a number of years now. And so what I'm excited about this week is, despite the fact that I have, a ton of data, I've been trying to do these compare and contrasts. And so today I'm comparing and contrasting the European market with the US market. And not too many people have done that yet. And so I want, I'm typically the first in a lot of these things. And then the other thing I'm excited about is I've been looking at, I always try to customize my projects to each conference so that there's fresh data in every one of my presentations. And so today I'm really excited. I did an analysis of tourism in Spain. And so there's a ton of tourism. And then there's the social club model that's prolific in Spain, but primarily so in Barcelona. About a third to a half of all of the social clubs in Spain are located in Barcelona, right? And so then I'm actually able to look at the economic impact of those social clubs. And so now I can start putting together some numbers on the economic impact of tourism in Spain, or I could look at, all of this type of economic thing to jobs and other things to show that there's a place for economically for cannabis in all of these different societies.
Yeah, because we're looking at cannabis tourism in cities. Like, I know I've done some writing around cannabis tourism for California. And one of the things that we talk about is talking to people who are in tourism, may not understand cannabis, but about the impact of heads and beds.
Yeah, there's a group and an individual that I've been working with. We've been trying to collaborate for a long time, and now we're starting to get there. His name's Brian Applegarth.
I love Brian.
And so Brian and I have been working on, he does a lot in the tourism space. And then now we're starting to put some of my numbers behind that. And so it's really a great collaboration and partnership. So there is a lot going on in California, for example. There's little pockets of tourism, and so I think it's really important to get the data out there and then have like economic development teams look at their community and say, how can we be more inclusive? Because it's not just a matter of the recreational side of things. Cannabis can be used for wellness. And so, if you have a cannabis-centric spa, for example, you could have CBD massages, you could have hemp-derived foods, you could have all sorts of things that aren't necessarily on the intoxicating side, but are still inclusive of the cannabis nonetheless.
Yeah, I love that. With my work in policy, we have a lot of conversations about, and this is it for California, the high cost of entry into the market, the overtaxation, and the fact that the state of California would actually be making more money in taxes if they lower the barrier to entry, lower the taxation, And in turn, also that would help shrink the illicit market so they would have to spend less money on enforcement. Do you have conversations with policymakers about what makes sense with taxation? Because it seems like when we look at policy and cannabis, Common Sense Controller's Office did a report on the fact that price per gram of cannabis had gone up in 2020, and they said it was due to competition. And I said, if you know anything about economics, that's not how it works. Do you have to do a lot of educating around that?
Yeah, and that's one of my primary roles as an educator. And one of the first times that I was introduced into the kind of the modern day cannabis industry, not the college day, was one of my students in my class was he introduced me to cannabis, and in his role, he had a company and he was making bath salts. And it was for pain relief and the like. And so he introduced me into that. But that was in a college setting. You know, I was teaching at the university. And and I asked him how big he thought the market was in the Oregon at the time. And he's like, I don't know, you're the economist, you tell me, right? And so that was kind of the beginning. So I've always looked at cannabis from an educational lens, since that was kind of where the whole genesis of it was, for me, at least. And so, yes, I do have to do a lot of policy advisory and education. You know, I think there is a lot of econ 101 in all of this that people, policymakers in particular, don't understand. Cannabis for them is very emotional. It's either very positively emotional or very negatively emotional. And so what I try to do through my education is present the data, because the data can take the emotion out of things. And then hopefully good policies and practices will result from that data. But what we're seeing in general about cannabis and opening up opportunities such as what you had mentioned for California, is there's just a few variables in the whole equation that will, increase revenues and the like, and it'll determine the success or failure of the normalization of cannabis in an economy. And one of them is the regulatory structure. It can define opportunities or it can remove opportunities. It could be a significant barrier to entry. And another is supply. If you have too little supply, prices remain elevated, and then you don't have the consumer participating in the legal market, you'll have them participating in the illicit market. And then price is a big determinant in there. There's a lot of price insensitivity. And then access. And so if you have access, then you have the opportunity to participate legally. But if there's no access, then by default, you have to. So by putting all those little variables, supply, access, regulatory structure, price, aka taxation, when you put all those together, then you can start modeling out this stuff and then provide sound inputs into the policymakers. For example, I found that consumers are very price sensitive, but even with that sensitivity, they're still willing to pay a premium to do things on legal market, just as long as that premium, which is the difference between legal price and illicit price, just as long as that 10 to 15%. So if you have 10 to 15% higher price than the illicit market, and you have access, then consumers will gladly participate. But once you get above that 15%, then consumers, the conversion into the legal market, it slows down dramatically the farther away you get from that illicit price market. And it's all about consumer participation. So in a lot of my analytics, I look at the level of consumer participation. And so in some markets, they keep prices low. They have good access and high levels of participation. Others, when they tax it heavily, like the state of Washington in the United States, they have 39% sales tax plus a 7% or no, sorry, a 9% local tax. And so you have 46% tax. And then they're scratching their heads wondering why only 52% of the sales that occur in Washington are through the legal channels, right? And so that's the legal participation. So a lot of this plays a role. And in my efforts, I'm able to provide that inside the data, kind of explain and walk the policymakers through that so that they can have a better understanding of the market and the mechanics thereof.
Do you find that they're open to the learnings?
Well, like I said, policymaking is very emotional. And in one of my old roles, I actually have worked in the cannabis industry as a chief operations officer of a large vertically integrated company that we were the first ones to, with U.S. operations, to go public on the Canadian Securities Exchange. So we went from small medical to big medical to big adult use to public. So in that regard, I have that experience to draw upon. And back a number of years ago, we actually sponsored a Republican policy summit. We were one of the co-sponsors of the event. And because we thought it was hilarious that a cannabis company was sponsoring a policy event, regardless if it was Democrat or Republican. When we started talking, and we gained access. And so we started talking to some of the representatives and state senators. And one person said, my brother got addicted to marijuana and he died of a heroin overdose. And so I will never allow for the legalization of marijuana. And it was a negative emotion. Then the other person that we talked to said, I know a lot of small business owners. We promote small business, and they seem to be doing all right. And at least they have the opportunity to try. Another one says, my mom, we had to put her in a home. She was really struggling. She didn't like the medicine that they were giving her. She was always doped up. We gave her cannabis as an alternative, and she started thriving. And so that woman was very pro cannabis reform policy because she had a positive net experience on it. So you get all kinds, but for those that are reasonable and that can set their emotion aside, either positive or negative, then they'll take the data gladly because there's just so little of it that's credible out there. And that's where Whitney Economics, has filled a niche now for the last 11 years.
That's awesome. When you're looking at the European market, which by and large is much more through the lens of pragmatic harm reduction with their culture, what do you think there is to learn from what you would report out from the States?
Well, in my speech today, I'm going to say, here's some things that the Europeans are doing right, but here's a lot of things that the U.S. is doing wrong. And so don't repeat the mistakes of the U.S. So a lot of it is more comparing and contrasting the EU versus the U.S. and trying to avoid the pitfalls. Like, for example, I'm going to come out with a report on supply here shortly, and I've assessed every state market, illicit and legal. We've looked at the capacity that's been legally authorized by regulators, and there is about 230% more supply capacity than is required to satisfy all of the demand in the United States. And so and what are operators complaining about in the United States? Well, yes, there's policies restrictive, that restricts access. Like the dispensary model in the United States is a totally failed model. So don't do that one. But then you have high taxes at the federal level. But then you also have a lot of talk about people not making money. Well, one of the reasons that they're not making money is because there's so much supply and there's not enough demand. Then basic Econ 101 means that if you have more supply, then prices are going to go down. And so prices are going down at the same time that, especially post-pandemic, the input costs are going up. So labor and other things, transportation, all the stuff is increasing in price. So margins are being compressed and going negative. And so we did a survey. We do a national survey every year on business conditions. And last year, only 27.3% of the operators in the U.S. Responded that they were profitable.
Wow.
So that's a quarter. Another 40% or so said that they were breaking even. And a full third were not making any money at all. And so as bad as that sounds, that's actually an improvement from the year before. And so you're in an environment right now where, because of this oversupply and confining the demand into the dispensaries, you can't have the opportunity to expand your market for interstate commerce or international exports. You don't have these opportunities. And so you're kind of stuck with an oversupply situation and declining prices, compressing margins, and lack of profitability. So it's a real tough market out there right now for the U.S. operators. And so it's just a tough market. And it's tough to regulate this stuff too. So, so a lot of it comes down to just not being aware of the impacts of these policies and what they're having on the operators themselves.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that we talk about a lot on the podcast is the fact that the public gets very frustrated with how policy happens and the prices. But one of the biggest things I think right now that to implement change is also having, well, our policymakers have an outdated view still of who the average cannabis user is.
Yeah.
And so if people who could come out and say, hey, I pay my taxes, I contribute to society, I use cannabis and I vote, there would be some substantial impact as well.
Yeah, I think that right now, because of all of the dysfunction between the two parties in the U.S., that they're fighting these other battles, and cannabis is just not on their radar.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, but it's just not a priority. And so these reforms that seem logical and pragmatic and would be beneficial to the health of the operators and to enable them to be sustainable and viable, a lot of those basic reforms are just not being implemented and not even being discussed. And if they are being discussed, then in those hearings, they're being pushed out and delayed and all that. So from that, all these delays, well, if you're not making any money and, you've got your house on the line that you put up as collateral for a loan because you don't have access to banking, there's a lot of potential personal wealth destruction that could occur unless reform is done and done very quickly. And so all of this pushing out of these policies, decisions are having a pretty significant and dramatic effect on the operators throughout the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so glad that you're in the thick of it and you're giving people their reality checks. And I would really love it if you would come back to the podcast so we could do a longer discussion, because I think we have a lot to talk about.
There's a lot to unpack, and I'd love to do that. And I just appreciate the opportunity. It takes a village, right?
It does.
I've been around this for a long time, and I've focused on just a core area of the economics of this. But there's a lot of people doing some great work on the legal side, on the accounting side, and then also on the medicinal side. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that there's been a lot of people that have helped me out along the way, and many of them are not around anymore. But they were staunch advocates for medical access, and the whole industry was born and supported on the backs of the medical patients. And so, I always try to keep them in mind in everything that I do, just to honor their legacy, but it's also out of respect for the sacrifices that they made so that we could be on a podcast talking about weed in Barcelona.
Exactly.
We're quite blessed,
We are. I'm so glad that we saw each other here. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. Yep.
Thanks so much, Beau.
Thank you.
And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend, let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sara Payan on Facebook and Planted with Sara on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsara.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher. Tune in. We are there. So join us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.